Zach Turner stopped in front of a small, one-story house with peeling light blue paint on the front. He clutched a set of brand-new keys in his hand. He had signed the final paperwork with a realtor that morning and was now officially the owner of the house. It was his first home, a big step for the 27-year-old mechanic from a factory in Ohio. Zach took a deep breath, smelling the mixed scent of fresh paint and old wood wafting off the porch. Zach opened the door and stepped over the threshold. It was empty and dusty inside, with only streaks of light from the midday sun falling on the wooden floor of the living room. The house needed some TLC, but Zach was willing to put in the work. He walked through the rooms, imagining how he would arrange the furniture. In the living room, there was an old leather sofa that his uncle had given him, and across from it, a shelf for the TV he was planning to buy. In the kitchen, a small dining table and two chairs, enough for now. He ran his hand over the cracked countertop. He would have to replace it, but that was okay, he could handle it. Zach worked as a mechanic at a local farm machinery factory. It wasn't an easy job, you were on your feet all day, covered in oil and grease, but the pay was steady. He'd been saving for years, denying himself unnecessary expenses to save up for a down payment on a house. And now his goal was achieved. His own house, albeit old and in need of repair, but his own. He felt proud and relieved at the same time. No more renting, no more cohabiting with roommates as he had in his youth. Now he had a place he could call his own. In the first days after the purchase, Zach devoted himself entirely to the arrangement. In the evenings, returning from the factory, he changed light bulbs, fixed a leaky faucet in the bathroom, and sealed cracks in the windows. He personally repainted the walls of the bedroom in a warm beige color and the kitchen in light yellow so that it seemed sunny even in winter. He examined every nail, every floorboard, and, if necessary, tightened, nailed, repaired. This did not burden him, on the contrary, it brought him pleasure. Zach imagined how one day this house would be filled with family, the laughter of children, the smell of home-cooked food on Sundays. Sometimes in the evenings he would sit on the porch with a cold beer, looking out at the quiet street. The neighbors were friendly. Mr. Holden, from the house across the street, waved to him when he went out to water the lawn, and elderly Mrs. Roy, the neighbor to the right, brought an apple pie for a housewarming on the third day. Zach, smiling and a little embarrassed, accepted the treat and exchanged a few words about the weather and the neighborhood. He liked this quiet, almost rural atmosphere on the outskirts of the city. After the noise of rented apartments and neighbors' parties next door, the quiet of his own home seemed a blessing. Zach's best friend, Dylan Ross, came to help with the move. The two of them used Dylan's pickup to move Zach's modest belongings, a couple suitcases of clothes, tools, boxes of dishes, and books. Zach's only furniture was the aforementioned couch and an old TV stand, all of which fit in one trip. The men sweated as they carried the heavy couch into the living room, but were pleased with the result. Sitting on the same couch in the middle of the still empty room, the friends opened a bottle of beer. Dylan clapped Zach on the shoulder. "Well, homeowner, congratulations," Dylan said with a wide grin. "It's not every day that your best friend gets his own home." "Thanks, buddy," Zach replied, raising the bottle. "I couldn't have done this couch without you." "Nonsense," Dylan waved his hand. He looked around at the bare walls. "I see you have a ton of plans. Are you going to do any renovations?" Gradually, Zach nodded. "First, the most necessary. I fixed the faucet, checked the sockets. Then, maybe, I'll sand the floors and re-roof by next summer, and then we'll see." Dylan whistled respectfully. "I see you're serious about settling down. Maybe you've finally started thinking about a family." He winked, hinting at an old topic. Zach smiled back, looking at the amber glow of the beer in the bottle. "I thought about it, of course. That's what it was all about. I want to settle down, make my own nest." "Well, we have a house. All that's left is to find the owner of the house," Dylan laughed. Zach just chuckled, but somewhere deep down he agreed with his friend. He really did miss having someone close by. There had been dates, there had been relationships, but nothing really serious since he had returned from the army and got a job at the plant. Now that the material base had been laid, He could think about a family. A few weeks after moving in, Zach had settled into the house. The living room had more furniture. He'd bought an inexpensive coffee table and a couple of bookshelves. On one wall, he'd hung a photo of his parents, smiling in front of the Grand Canyon, where they'd visited many years ago. The garage was also busy. There was an old 1975 Ford pickup truck there, rusty and inoperable, a project Zach had planned to tackle when he had the time and money. For now, the truck was gathering dust under a tarp, but the fact that it existed made Zach happy. His father had once given him the car, and he'd been dreaming of fixing it up. One evening, having already completed the main chores with settling in, Zach went to a barbecue at a mutual friend from work. In the suburbs, in the backyard of a small cottage, a noisy company had gathered, colleagues from the factory, their friends and relatives. It was there that he met Olivia Miller, a slender, brown-eyed girl of about 25, who turned out to be the niece of the owner of the house. Olivia worked as a school teacher and came for the weekend to visit relatives. Zach struck up a conversation with her at the table with snacks at first. They exchanged a few pleasantries about the weather and a successful marinade for the shashlik, and then got carried away by the conversation. They laughed at how awkward they felt among strangers, discussed music and films. Olivia turned out to be an intelligent and sincere conversationalist, and her friendly smile immediately won over. Zach could not take his eyes off her radiant eyes and lively facial expressions, noticing that he himself was talking more than usual. By the end of the evening, Zach realized he didn't want to miss the chance to continue the conversation. Gathering his courage, he approached Olivia, who was just about to leave, and asked if she would be willing to have coffee with him in the city sometime. The girl smiled a little sheepishly and dictated her phone number. That's how the story of their relationship began. A year after that meeting, Zach proposed to Olivia in his cozy, personally renovated house, on the porch of which they liked to sit in the evenings. She said yes, and a new chapter of life awaited them, this time together, under the same roof. 4 years have passed since their wedding day. Zach and Olivia lived in their small house, a measured, quiet life, which they dreamed of. The house, which Zach once furnished alone, was now filled with the comfort and warmth of a family hearth. Olivia brought a feminine look to the interior. Light curtains with a floral pattern appeared on the windows, a tall green ficus in a pot in the corner of the living room. The walls were decorated with photos from their joint trips. Here they are smiling on the shore of Lake Erie, and here is a picture from a trip to Nashville, where they celebrated their first wedding anniversary. The couple's daily routine was calm. In the mornings, Zach got up earlier than Olivia. His shift at the plant began at 7 a.m. He quietly slipped out of bed, trying not to wake his wife, made himself a simple breakfast, bacon and eggs or oatmeal, and drank strong black coffee in the semi-darkness of the kitchen. Before leaving, he always looked into the bedroom. Olivia was still asleep, covered with a blanket, and Zach tenderly adjusted a strand of hair that had fallen out on her forehead, after which he quietly left. He liked this morning ritual farewell, even if Olivia did not see him. Olivia woke up later, by 7:30. Her school started around 9. She worked at an elementary school, teaching math and science to 3rd and 4th graders. In the morning, she'd get ready quickly, often grabbing only a yogurt or a piece of fruit, and race to school, where she'd find noisy classrooms and piles of notebooks. Sometimes she and Zach would run into each other in the driveway, him just parking his used sedan after a night shift if he was taking a part-time job, and she'd be driving her compact to class. These brief encounters were marked by smiles and a few "have a nice day" and "take care." The evenings were their time. Olivia usually returned around 5 p.m., laden with folders of graded work and new syllabi. Zach arrived a little later, around 6 if he wasn't working overtime. Tired from work, they enjoyed the simple things: eating dinner together, watching their favorite TV show, or taking a leisurely stroll around the block and talking about everything under the sun. They often cooked dinner together. Olivia peeled vegetables while Zach grilled meat or pan-fried steaks. The kitchen was full of excitement as they shared the events of the day. Olivia told funny stories from school. The time one of her 3rd graders brought a frog to class in his pocket and caused a ruckus, or how she was preparing the kids for the math Olympiad. Zach would share news from the factory, who had suddenly been sent on overtime today, how they had worked as a whole shift to fix a jammed press, or joke about the new intern who had mixed up the wrenches. After dinner, they often sat on the porch with cups of tea or homemade lemonade, especially in the warmer months. The neighbors became good friends. Mrs. Roy would drop by to chat about flowers and sometimes bring treats, and Mr. Holden might ask for help fixing the lawn mower, knowing Zach's skills. Olivia also became involved in the local community. She attended the library book club on Wednesdays and quickly became friends with several of the neighbors, discussing novels and recipes with them. Sometimes on weekends, Zach and Olivia would go out into nature. Fortunately, there were several picturesque parks in the area. They had picnics, grilled hot dogs on coals, and played badminton. Other weekends were devoted to housework. Together they painted the fence around the property, planted hydrangea and lilac bushes near the porch. Olivia enthusiastically planted a small vegetable garden in the backyard beds with tomatoes, herbs, and a couple of pumpkins. Zach built a wooden fence for the vegetable garden to protect it from rabbits. The work went well, and they got genuine pleasure from seeing the results of their labors. Of course, there are no perfect people, and they also had disagreements. Sometimes Olivia was irritated that Zach scattered socks around the house after work or forgot to take out the trash. And Zach was offended when Olivia, tired, refused to go to the cinema or meet his friends, preferring to stay at home. But they tried to resolve all these minor conflicts peacefully. If a quarrel was brewing, the spouses sat down at the kitchen table and calmly discussed the problem. Zach learned to listen carefully to his wife. To admit when he was wrong, for example, he made a rule to immediately throw dirty clothes in the laundry basket, seeing how irritating it was to her. Olivia tried not to take it out on her husband after a hard day and learned to express requests more gently. As a result, grievances did not accumulate for a long time. One of the serious conversations took place in the third year of marriage, when the conversation turned to children. They were sitting on the couch late at night, Olivia leafing through a magazine where the topic of motherhood came up. Zach noticed the thoughtfulness on his wife's face and asked what she was thinking about. Olivia admitted that her colleagues were increasingly having children and asking if it was time for them to think about it too. Zach then carefully answered that he also wanted children, but maybe a little later they needed to get on their feet a little more, save up money, and just enjoy each other's company. Olivia agreed to postpone this step, especially since she had just turned 28 and there seemed to be enough time ahead. They decided to return to this conversation in a couple of years. This compromise suited both of them. They loved each other and believed that everything was still ahead. During those years, Olivia sometimes missed her best friend Harper. Harper Green had been her close friend since her college days, but after graduating, their paths diverged. Harper moved to another state after getting married. They kept in touch mainly by phone and on social networks. Harper flew to Olivia's wedding, had the most fun, caught the bride's bouquet, but then left again, and life twisted each in its own way. Sometimes, seeing funny memes on the internet or encountering life's little things that she and Harper used to discuss, Olivia felt a little sad. However, her circle of concerns and her loving husband nearby did not allow her to immerse herself in longing for the old days for long. So the days, weeks, years passed, quietly and measuredly. To an outside observer, the Turner family looked like a model of happiness. Young, healthy, self-sufficient people living in harmony. They trusted each other, made plans together, for example, dreaming of a short vacation on the ocean or how they would someday add a veranda to the house. The phone call caught Olivia by surprise on Friday night. She had just finished checking her notebooks at the kitchen table when her cell phone lit up with an unfamiliar number from an unfamiliar state. Olivia frowned and picked up the phone. "Hello? It can't be. Did I really hear Mrs. Turner's voice?" A cheerful half-whisper, half-scream came from the speaker. Olivia's eyes widened, immediately recognizing the intonation. "Harper? Oh my God!" She jumped out of her chair with unexpected joy. It was indeed Harper Green, her best friend from her youth, with whom she had not spoken for several months. Olivia's heart began to pound. In person, my dear, Harper laughed. Sorry I disappeared, I've had such a change here. Anyway, I'm coming home, I'll be in your area, and I really want to see you. Are you moving back? How? When? It's a long story, Harper drawled. Better in person. I'm flying in next Tuesday. I hope you don't mind a guest for a few days. I've missed you terribly. Of course, come. Zach and I would be delighted, Olivia beamed. There is so much to discuss. Harper, I have been waiting for you to come. They exchanged excited remarks for a few more minutes and finally agreed. On Tuesday, Olivia would pick up her friend from the airport. When Zach returned home from work, he found his wife in high spirits. Olivia was literally fluttering around the house, tidying up the guest room. Are we expecting a guest? Zach asked, hanging his jacket on the hook. Yes, and not just any guest, Harper, Olivia said happily, peeking out of the bedroom with an armful of fresh bed linen. Remember I told you about my best friend? Zach narrowed his eyes, remembering. Harper, that naughty brunette you went to school with? I think I've seen her in pictures. That's right, she's the one, Olivia confirmed. We've been through so much together. And now, can you imagine, she's coming back to Ohio. I invited her to stay with us. Great, Zach responded, smiling sincerely. He was pleased to see his wife so happy. How is she? How is life with your friend? Olivia put the pillows back in their covers and, softening her smile, replied, It seems not to be going very smoothly. She said she would tell me when we met. But it seems she is coming back for good. Maybe she is having problems in her marriage, or already divorced. I don't know for sure. I see. Well, I hope everything works out for her, said Zach. We'll welcome her as an honored guest. On Tuesday, Olivia barely made it to lunch at work and, asking for an early day off, rushed to the airport. At the arrivals area, she noticed Harper right away. She stood out in the crowd. Tall, bright, with chestnut hair falling in soft waves on her shoulders, Harper was dressed, albeit simply in jeans and a leather jacket, but tastefully. Olivia called out to her friend, and a second later they were hugging, squealing with joy like girls. Let me look at you. Harper took a step back, holding Olivia by the shoulders. You haven't changed a bit. You're still just as beautiful. How I've missed you. You look great too, Olivia replied, noting the slight tiredness in her friend's eyes. How was your flight? Oh, don't ask, Harper rolled her eyes. That crying baby in the next seat was driving me crazy, but it's nothing. The main thing is that I'm here. They laughed again and, picking up Harper's suitcase, headed for the exit. On the way to the car, Olivia couldn't help but say, Well, tell me, what happened? You came so unexpectedly. Harper sighed, her smile fading slightly. I'll tell you, of course. But first I'd like to have some coffee, otherwise my head is like cast iron from this flight. Agreed. I know a place on the way home. Half an hour later, the friends were sitting in a cozy coffee shop not far from the Turner's house. Large mugs of cinnamon lattes stood in front of them. Harper cupped the mug in her hands and finally began her story. In short, everything disappeared, like in the movies. She smiled sadly. Do you remember Tom, my husband? Now my ex-husband. We got divorced. Oh, Olivia said quietly, placing her hand on her friend's wrist. I'm sorry. What happened? What? Harper shrugged, trying to sound indifferent, but her voice betrayed her offense. He found someone else. Can you imagine? He traded me for some assistant at his firm. He dragged out the affair for 2 years, and I was blind. I didn't suspect anything. In the end, when everything came out, he filed for divorce without even trying to fix things. But now, she snorted, I have plenty of free time and decent alimony, you could say payment for moral damages. Olivia squeezed her friend's hand tighter. Poor thing, how hard it must have been for you. At first, yes, Harper admitted, looking away. I thought the ground had fallen out from under my feet. And then, a couple of months passed, and suddenly I felt relieved, like I'd thrown off the chains. No more wifely duties, no more cooking, no more laundry, No more pretending in front of his family. Do what you want, live for yourself. It turns out that freedom isn't so bad. I filed for alimony, and the court awarded me a very generous amount. So for the foreseeable future, I'll be financially independent. Olivia listened to her friend, torn between sympathy and unexpected respect. Harper seemed to have managed to maintain her spirits. "And that's why you decided to come back?" she asked. "Exactly. What would I do there?" Harper took a sip of coffee. "I love our town. You are here, old friends. My parents are gone, may they rest in peace, so there is nothing really keeping me here except you. I thought, why sit alone in Florida if I can start all over again in my homeland? So I rented an apartment here for the first time and flew in." "I'm so glad you're here," Olivia said sincerely. "We'll make up for all the lost time." That evening, when he and Harper pulled up to the house, they were greeted by the aroma of lasagna baking in the oven. Zach had taken pains to prepare dinner. At the door, he greeted Harper with a friendly handshake, which she coquettishly turned into a brief hug. "I've heard so much about you, Mr. Turner," Harper smiled. "Finally, we'll get to know each other better." Likewise, Zach nodded with a slight smile. "Pleased to meet you, Harper. Make yourself at home." The three of them had a lively conversation over dinner. Harper turned out to be an excellent storyteller. She told funny and slightly sarcastic stories about her adventures of recent years, without, however, going into the painful details of her divorce. She gave Zach the impression of an energetic and witty girl, although in places he caught himself thinking that Harper was rather cynical about marriage and men. For example, when the conversation turned to work, Zach complained that he was tired of changing the hydraulic pump on the press today, to which Harper joked, "It's good to be a mechanic. You fix a piece of iron, and it works. If only relationships were like that. If they break, bam, and you put in a new part." There was irony in her tone. "It's more complicated for people," Zach agreed softly, not wanting to argue. "But you can still fix it if you try." Harper narrowed her eyes slyly. I don't know. Sometimes it seems that it's easier to throw out the old mechanism and buy a new one than to bother with repairs." There was a moment of silence at the table. Olivia glanced at her friend, alarmed, catching the subtext. To lighten the mood, she changed the subject, asking Harper about her plans for the new place, and the conversation returned to a lighter tone. The following days were filled with conversations between the friends. Olivia took the weekend off to spend time with Harper. They went shopping, visited a beauty salon, and got new haircuts. In the evenings, when Zach returned tired from his shift, the women could still talk for hours in the kitchen over a glass of wine. They laughed, looking through old photos, recalling their college antics. Olivia seemed to grow younger before our eyes. Her eyes sparkled. She smiled a lot. Zach was happy for his wife, but sometimes he felt like a spare part. When the conversation turned to some distant mutual female acquaintances or to cases where he couldn't keep up the topic, he politely went off to do his own thing, like playing something in the garage or watching TV. Harper, on the other hand, seemed to rule the house at these moments. She would open the kitchen window wide open when she heard her favorite song and start singing along, or leave unwashed glasses, promising to wash them later but forgetting. She was a colorful guest, and Zach tried to ignore the minor inconveniences, understanding how important it was for Olivia. Before leaving, Harper surprised Olivia by inviting her to a small spa hotel outside the city for the whole day. They spent Saturday basking in the sauna, swimming pool, and treated themselves to massages. In the evening, relaxed and content, they sat in the hotel lobby with cocktails. It was there that the conversation first turned to what was troubling Olivia deep down her marriage. Harper, sipping a mojito through a straw, suddenly asked, looking her friend straight in the eye, "Well, tell me honestly, are you happy, Liv?" Olivia was taken aback. "What do you mean? Of course I'm happy. I have a wonderful husband, a house, a job." Harper tilted her head slightly. Yes, I see. But you don't sound very convincing. Are you happy with how things are going? Don't you feel like you're missing something?" Olivia frowned, twirling the glass in her hands. "What makes you think that? Zach and I are doing well." Yes, life, routine, but who isn't like that? It's normal. It's fine, Harper drawled. You know, I thought everything was fine for me too. And then I suddenly realized that I was living a life that was just a pattern, nothing of my own. Work home, weekends with my husband at his boring get-togethers, and where am I in all of this? She poked her finger at her chest. And you, Olivia, you always dreamed of traveling, wanted to write a book, didn't you? And you became an exemplary wife. That's not bad, of course. But is that your ultimate dream? Olivia couldn't find what to say right away. Harper's words had struck a chord. Of course, she was happy with Zach. Weren't they? Those were good years. But it was also true that many of her personal dreams had been put on the back burner. Writing a book, yes, she had wanted to in her youth. She had even started stories. Traveling too, except for a couple of trips, they hadn't gone far. But did it matter? Life isn't a movie, not everything at once. There was still time to do it. I'm happy, she repeated more firmly, as if convincing not only Harper but herself as well. Zach is great. Yes, it can be difficult, but who has a marriage that's a celebration? We're a team. Harper raised her hands in a placating gesture. Okay, I'm not getting worked up. I just want you not to lose yourself, my friend. You're talented, bright. Don't turn into a boring, downtrodden wife, okay? If you suddenly feel like you need more freedom, respect, self-realization, promise to tell me. I'll always support you. Olivia nodded hesitantly, and the conversation ended. But the thought thrown out by Harper settled somewhere at the bottom of her consciousness. That night, having already returned home, Olivia could not fall asleep for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Zach, tired after work, was quietly snoring next to her. Olivia carefully turned to him, peering into her husband's familiar face in the moonlight. She loved him, there was no doubt. So why did Harper's words sting her soul? The young woman closed her eyes, trying to drive away the obsessive questions. There was a new day ahead, and she needed to get enough sleep. However, for the first time in a long time, her inner peace cracked. After Harper left, life returned to normal, but it no longer seemed the same. Olivia continued to go to school every day, grade notebooks, cook dinners, but questions kept popping up in her mind, like anchors left by her friend. She caught herself comparing her everyday life with the vivid episodes she had experienced in a short time with Harper. Right now, it was a quiet Tuesday evening. Zach was sitting in front of the TV, switching channels between the news and a baseball game, and Olivia was folding laundry. This picture had suited her before. She found comfort in these quiet moments. But now a vague irritation gnawed at her soul. Her memory of recent get-togethers with Harper floated up in her mind. Their laughter, music, cocktails life seemed to be playing with colors there, beyond the walls of the usual routine. Zach, she called, setting down a stack of towels. How do you like my new haircut? Did you notice? The husband looked up from the screen and at her, trying to focus. Did you get a haircut? He asked uncertainly. I think so. The bangs are a little shorter. It suits you. Olivia sighed quietly. She had changed her hair dramatically 3 days ago, during a trip to the salon with Harper. She had long hair, now it was much shorter, a stylish bob. Zach hadn't noticed it for the first 2 days, and only now, after a direct question, had he noticed it. Yes, I got my hair cut, she replied, trying to hide her disappointment. Okay, never mind. She went into the bedroom under the pretext of putting the linen away in the closets, but in reality to hide the tears of frustration that had burst forth. He doesn't care. Is he really that used to it? She thought, throwing the t-shirts into the drawer. Not long ago, Olivia would have justified her husband. Well, he's tired, he's thinking about his own things, it happens to everyone. But now it seemed like confirmation of Harper's words a man can stop appreciating, taking for granted. A week after her friend left, Olivia couldn't take it anymore and called her to share her feelings. They agreed to meet at a cafe after work. Zach was working overtime that night, so Olivia told herself it was okay to have dinner with her friend. They took a table by the window at a small coffee shop on the corner. Harper listened intently as Olivia spoke. And now he's forgotten about my new project at school again. I told him how I was preparing an exhibition of children's works and asked him to help me put together the stands. He promised, but never did, until I reminded him at the last minute. He thinks that my work is nonsense compared to his factory. And anyway, she pushed away the cup of cold tea. Zach has become somewhat detached. He watches his movies, tinkers around in the garage, and she fell silent. And you feel lonely, Harper concluded softly. You're next to him, but it's like you're on your own. Olivia nodded, looking down. It hurt to say it out loud, but it seemed true. Sometimes it seems to me, she whispered, that we are gradually drifting apart, like neighbors under the same roof who live parallel lives. Harper covered her friend's hand with her own. Liv, listen. You deserve to feel alive, loved. If something is wrong, you need to change it. But how? Olivia asked helplessly. Talking. I tried. When I try to tell him about my feelings, he says, like, everything is fine with us. What are you thinking about? He's not bad, he just doesn't understand. Harper tilted her head, studying Olivia's face for a moment. You know, sometimes you need to shake things up. Get out of your usual circle to understand what you really want. What are you suggesting? Olivia asked, alarmed. Well, Harper paused, choosing her words. Like, take a break. In the relationship. Move away for a while, live separately. Olivia's eyes widened in surprise. Separate? I don't want to get divorced, if that's what you mean. No, no, of course we're not talking about divorce now, Harper hastened to explain. It's about a break, not completely, but to try living apart for a while, to see how you are without each other, to think calmly without the daily routine, what's more important to you. Sometimes distance helps you look at the relationship from the outside. Either you'll understand that you miss each other and want to get everything back, or you'll understand that you can't be together any longer. That's radical, Olivia said, leaning back in her chair. The thought had never occurred to her before to temporarily leave her husband without going through with the divorce. But it's honest, Harper persisted. You're unhappy right now, no matter how you look at it. Why torture yourself and him? It's better to take a time out and sort yourself out. Olivia was silent for a long time, looking out the window at the passers-by. The idea sounded scary, but there was a strange logic to it. She really has been unhappy lately, and she was afraid that it would only get worse. Maybe a little distance would help bring back the taste for life. Let her understand whether she needed this family as much as she thought before. I'll think about it, she finally said quietly. That evening, Olivia returned home later than usual. Zach had already returned from an overtime shift and had warmed up his dinner. He looked at his wife with a slightly worried expression. Hi, where have you been? I was worried I couldn't get through to you. Olivia felt a pang of guilt. There were indeed several missed calls on her phone. Sorry, she said wearily. I stayed in town after work. Met up with Harper, chatted. Didn't notice how time flew. Zach nodded reservedly, putting his empty plate in the sink. I see. You probably see each other often now? Well, she just got back. Yes, I wanted to catch up. He turned to her. Everything is fine. Olivia threw her coat over the back of the chair. I'm fine. I'm just tired. Let's not do this now. I think I'll go straight to bed. She passed him by without kissing him goodnight, as she usually did. Zach was left alone in the kitchen, feeling a growing sense of unease. He loved Olivia, and he could see that something was wrong with her. She was away from home more often. Her gaze was different, thoughtful, sometimes cold. Zach tried to understand what was wrong, but so far he had no answer. A vague, dull fear was brewing inside him. What if he was losing her? That night, lying next to Olivia, who was already asleep, Zach stared at the ceiling for a long time. He remembered the words of Dylan, who had stopped by his garage the other day. His friend had then half-jokingly remarked, Listen, Zach, you look like a beaten dog. Why are you so gloomy? Is everything okay at home? Then Zach had waved it off, not wanting to air dirty laundry in public. But now he admitted to himself, indeed, something was wrong, and something had to be done. But what? He turned on his side, hugged his sleeping wife carefully, trying not to wake her. She winced slightly in her sleep and pulled away without waking up. Zach felt his heart squeeze. He desperately missed the old closeness, the ease between them. He hoped that these were temporary difficulties, that they would spend the weekend together and everything would work out. On Sunday morning, a few days after that conversation in the cafe, Olivia made up her mind. She had been out of sorts all weekend, barely speaking to Zach, lost in her thoughts. Zach could feel the tension growing, but he didn't know how to start a conversation, afraid to hear what was in the air. But he couldn't stay silent any longer. At breakfast, when the two of them were sitting at the kitchen table, Olivia pushed away her plate with half-eaten toast and said quietly, "We need to talk." Zach's heart sank. His wife's words sent a chill through his veins. He put down his coffee mug and looked into her eyes. "I'm listening." Olivia looked down at her clasped hands. She was silent for a few seconds, choosing her words. "Zach, I've been feeling confused lately. I'm unhappy in our marriage." Her voice wavered, but she pulled herself together and continued while he stood stunned in silence. "It's not your fault. You're good. It's just, I don't know what I want. There's emptiness and discontent in my soul, and I can't pretend that everything is okay. I feel like I've lost myself." Zach exhaled loudly, trying to comprehend what he had heard. I, I didn't know it was that bad, Liv. Why didn't you tell me before? I could tell you were upset, but why unhappy? What did I do wrong?" Olivia shook her head, desperately trying to explain something she didn't fully understand. "It's not about one single action. It's just that over the years, I've become a different person than I was. I always tried to be a good wife, a teacher, but it feels like I've put myself on a shelf somewhere. I had so many dreams, remember? And now, I wake up every day and know what's coming. School, home, dinner, sleep, and so on in a circle. It probably sounds stupid, but I'm suffocating from the monotony." She spoke incoherently, sometimes contradictorily, but Zach caught the main thing. She was bored with their life. He felt bitter and hurt. "But why didn't you talk about it? We could have changed something together," he said. "Go on vacation, find a new hobby. Is everything really so hopeless?" Olivia bit her lip, gathering her courage for the main thing. "I think we need to live separately for some time." The words, finally out loud, hung in the air. A bird chirped outside. Someone started a lawnmower outside. It was a normal Sunday morning. But in their kitchen, the world had turned upside down. Zach looked at his wife, not believing his ears. "Separately. Do you want to separate? Get divorced?" His voice was hoarse. "No," Olivia said quickly. "Not forever. I mean temporarily. Take a break. Try to live separately, think. Figure out what we want. It's just that right now I can't figure myself out, being here, continuing everything in the same old circle." Zach stood up from the table, trying to cope with the emotions that had washed over him. He paced the kitchen, holding his fist to his mouth. Then he stopped in front of his wife. "Harper advised you to do this, didn't she?" he blurted out suddenly. Olivia flushed. "What does Harper have to do with it? It was my decision. She just helped me face the truth." "What is the truth?" Zach smiled bitterly. "That our marriage is a prison for you? That you need to find yourself? It seems like you never lost yourself before." "Please don't," Olivia pleaded, standing up as well. "Don't make this any more difficult. I don't want a scandal. I'm just asking for a little time. It's better than leading to hatred." Tears glistened in her eyes. Zach's inside sank. He knew it was pointless to hold her by force, but he couldn't accept it. "And how long do you think this pause should last?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," Olivia whispered. "A month, 2, until I figure it out." "Where are you going to live all this time?" There was weariness in his voice. "Harper's," she admitted. "I've already spoken to her, and she's willing to take me in for as long as it takes." Zach clenched his jaw, fighting back a flash of irritation at Harper, but said nothing. He sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. The silence lasted for several minutes, broken only by the ticking of the clock over the stove. Finally, he removed his hands and looked at his wife with reddened eyes. "What if I tell you that this is a terrible idea? That we shouldn't move apart, but rather stay together and fight for our relationship? Will you listen?" Olivia closed her eyes, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I'm afraid that if we fight now, we'll only hurt each other more. I don't want to hurt you. It's better to be apart." Zach was silent. He did not agree, but he saw that his wife had already made her decision. The wife quietly approached and tried to touch his shoulder, but he moved away slightly. Then she simply said, "I'll start packing my things." The packing was brief and quiet. Olivia filled a suitcase and a couple of bags with the necessary clothes, toiletries, a few books, and personal items. Zach automatically helped carry the things out to her car, as if acting in a dream. He didn't know what to say. Everything inside him screamed, "Don't go," but he saw the determination in his wife's eyes and knew that persuasion would not help now. Before leaving, they stood by the car. Olivia turned to him, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Thank you for being understanding. Forgive me." Zach nodded, looking down at the gravel of the driveway. "Take care of yourself and don't do anything stupid." Olivia sobbed and suddenly hugged him tightly, like in the first years, pressing her face into his chest. Zach hugged her back, feeling her shoulders tremble. He wanted to turn back time, to bring back Olivia, who was now sobbing in his arms, to tell her that everything would be okay. But he only stroked her back, repeating, "It's okay, we'll get through this," not knowing who he was comforting more, her or himself. Finally, Olivia got into the car. The door slammed. Zach took a step back. The car rolled slowly down the road and stopped before reaching the turn. His wife's pale face appeared in the window. "I'll call, okay?" she said quietly. Zach nodded. Olivia gave him a sad smile as she said goodbye and stepped on the gas. The car disappeared around the corner. Zach stood in the yard for a few more minutes, not feeling the ground under his feet. The house behind him was now empty and silent. He slowly walked back up to the porch and went inside. Only his jacket hung forlornly on a hook in the hallway. His wife's coat was missing. Half of the things in the bedroom were gone. It was still their home, but without her. Zach sank down on the couch, staring at one point in front of him. He tried to comprehend what had happened. Fear, resentment, confusion, all the feelings were mixed up in his soul. "Maybe in a week she'll come to her senses and come back," he thought feverishly. "This is some kind of stupidity. We need to wait it out." He clung to the hope that this was really only temporary. Thus began their separate lives the first day when Zach woke up alone in an empty house and Olivia in a strange apartment, trying to understand what would happen next. The first few days without Olivia were hard on Zach. He found himself listening in the mornings to the sound of the bathroom door slamming, the light coming on in the kitchen. But the house greeted him with silence. There was no need to make a second cup of coffee, no one to rush so she wouldn't be late for work. The silence weighed on his chest, causing a painful sense of loss. In the evenings, returning from the factory, Zach would mechanically put two plates on the table, two cutlery, and each time he would pull himself together, removing the unnecessary. It was strange to eat alone. He would heat up some simple semi-finished products or eat sandwiches right next to the refrigerator, not finding the point in preparing a full dinner just for himself. The TV was on in the background almost constantly to fill the house with at least some sound. Zach would spend hours flipping through channels or aimlessly wandering around the rooms. In the bedroom, he would habitually lie down on his half of the bed first, but the empty space next to it seemed so wrong that he soon began sleeping on the sofa in the living room, turning on the dim light as a night light. After a couple of weeks, however, the sharp pain began to dull. A person gets used to everything, and Zach was no exception. He gradually developed a new routine. Deciding not to neglect the house, he cleaned on Saturdays, noting to himself that it was much easier to do it alone. There was almost no mess, because no one else used the things. The laundry was cut in half. The refrigerator was emptied of yogurts and greens that Olivia loved. But there was more beer and frozen pizza. Zach allowed himself a little bachelor diet, which he had previously restrained for the sake of his wife. Sometimes he even found some upsides to being alone. For example, he could sit late in the garage, tinkering with the engine of an old pickup, and no one would complain about the smell of oil wafting into the house. He could throw his tools around without fear of being blamed for the mess. Zach pulled his PlayStation out of its dusty drawer again and sometimes played shooters at full volume in the evenings without disturbing anyone's sleep. At first, these small freedoms made him feel guilty, like he was enjoying himself while his wife was gone. But then he realized that this was just a way to distract himself. And indeed, such moments eased the burden on his soul a little. He and Olivia barely spoke. In the first week after she left, she called once to check on him and say she had settled in with Harper for a while, that she was fine. The conversation was short and strained. Zach tried to sound calm, not showing pain, and Olivia tried to sound cheerful, although her voice was shaking. They agreed to take a break from communication too, to give each other space. After that, the phone was silent. Sometimes at night, unable to bear it, Zach opened their old album on social media and looked through their joint photos, trying to figure out at what point everything went downhill. But there were no answers. Not wanting to wallow in depression, Zach took Dylan up on his offer to go fishing. Early one Sunday morning, the friends loaded their gear into Dylan's truck and drove to a lake outside of town. They sat on the bank with their fishing rods and sat in silence for a good half hour, listening to the splashing of the water and the chirping of the birds. Finally, Dylan cleared his throat. "Well, how are you? Are you holding up?" Zach threw his cap back on his head. "I'm trying. I'm getting used to it little by little." He shrugged. "It's not fun, of course. The house is empty, everything is not the same without her. But what can you do?" Dylan glanced at his friend. "Is she getting in touch?" "Almost none. We decided to take a break from everything." Zach wound the fishing line around his finger. "I hope she changes her mind soon. But, but I have my doubts," Dylan finished for him. "Listen, I'll tell you straight. I don't like this whole situation, especially this friend of hers." Zach nodded. "Harper, I also have a feeling that it couldn't have happened without her. Olivia didn't think like that before, and then she met her divorced friend and off it went." Dylan chuckled. "Classic. An unhappy girlfriend drags you along. Of course, I'm not married, but even I understand. Stay away from such advisors. It's a shame that Olivia trusts her more than you." Zach looked at the float gloomily. "She's just confused. Harper supported her in her own way, but that doesn't make it any easier for me. I don't know what to do, Dill. Should I wait, or should I do something?" Dylan cast his line and chuckled. "What are your options? You'll come to her with flowers, make a scene it's unlikely to work. Either she'll decide to come back herself, or—" "Either it's all over," Zach said quietly. They were silent. For a long time, all that could be heard was the chirping of the crickets. Finally, Dylan touched his friend on the shoulder. "Listen, maybe you should take a break for now. Forget about this chewing. Let's go to a bar sometime. You'll have some fun. You're not a monk. We'll sit and chat with someone. Maybe we'll meet some cute girls," he winked. Zach shook his head. "No, thanks. I don't have time for girls right now. I'm still married, by the way." "Yeah, I know," Dylan sighed. "I just wanted to get you out of the house. Otherwise, you'll go crazy within four walls." "I'll think about it," Zach said conciliatorily. A week later, he finally agreed to his friend's offer to go to a sports bar to watch a football match. There, in a noisy company of fans, with a mug of beer, Zach felt almost normal for the first time in a long time. He and Dylan screamed along with everyone else when their favorite team scored a goal, arguing about the refereeing. For a couple of hours, Zach even distracted himself from his worries. After the match, the friends sat for a while, talking about abstract topics. Dylan clearly tried not to ask unnecessary questions, and Zach was grateful for that. As they parted, his friend patted him on the shoulder. "Hang in there, old man. If anything happens, call me anytime. Don't lock yourself away." "Thanks, buddy," Zach replied. Returning to the empty house at night, Zach found himself thinking that it was good to be alone. He hadn't sorted out his feelings in weeks from resentment to hope, but he had learned to live with them. The silence was no longer oppressive. It had become a neutral background to which he had adapted. As he went to bed, Zach thought that perhaps tomorrow after work, he would go back to work on his old truck. Working with his hands distracted his mind. If he comes back, great, he thought. No, well, life will go on. The thought was bitter, but there was already a hint of resignation in it. About a month had passed since the separation. Zach had almost resigned himself to waiting when Harper unexpectedly called him. It surprised him they had not spoken since Olivia left. Harper's voice on the phone was friendly and slightly worried. Hey, Zach. I know this might be sudden, but can we talk? In person, preferably. There's a topic about Olivia. Zach was wary. What could Harper possibly want? But his wife's name made him agree. They agreed to meet at the same coffee shop Harper liked to go to. Zach felt a mixture of emotions when he saw her. Harper smiled and waved at him as he walked in. Dressed in an elegant dress, she looked flawless, as if she was going on a date rather than a friendly get-together. Zach noted this briefly as he sat down across from her. Thanks for coming, Harper began, handing him the menu. Want a coffee or something stronger? Just kidding. Although I'm treating you, don't be shy. Coffee, thank you, he answered shortly. So what did you want to talk about? Harper motioned to the waiter and ordered 2 cappuccinos. Then, folding her hands on the table, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. Zach, I know you and Olivia are going through a tough time right now, and you're probably mad at me. You think I gave her all this advice. He frowned. Since you brought it up. Yes, I think so, and I don't understand why. Harper sighed, looking him straight in the eyes. Believe me, I had no evil intent. She's my friend. I wanted to help her figure herself out. But that's not the point now. I called you because I'm worried. About what? Zach asked coldly. The coffee arrived. Harper stirred the foam with a spoon and continued. About Olivia. I'm worried about her. She hasn't been herself lately. What do you mean? Zach tensed. What's wrong with her? Harper lowered her voice even more, as if confiding a secret to him. I think she has someone, a man. Zach's insides went cold. He stared at Harper, not believing his ears. What? No. Olivia would. She's not like that. Harper shook her head slightly. I always thought so too. But facts are stubborn things. I see how she behaves. Texts someone until late at night, smiles into her phone. Sometimes she leaves in the evening supposedly for a walk and comes back suspiciously lively. I didn't ask directly. She is an adult after all. She has the right to her own privacy. But I feel something is wrong. Zach squeezed the cup so hard his knuckles turned white. Does this someone have a name? I heard her on the phone a couple of times with someone named Jason, Harper said reluctantly. Probably just a colleague or friend. But you have to admit it's strange for a married woman, even if it's on hiatus. Jason. Zach repeated quietly, trying to remember if his wife had mentioned anyone by that name before. Nothing came to mind. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Harper said softly, covering his hand with hers. I just think you should know. It makes me sick to think that she could so quickly. Well, you know, I was hoping she'd come to her senses and come back to you. Zach looked at her hand on his, but felt nothing, as if he was looking at someone else's life from the outside. Why do you trust me with this? He asked dully. If she's your friend, maybe you should have talked to her. Harper removed her hand, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. I tried to find out carefully, but she's closing herself off. I only said that she had a new friend from the gym, with whom she had coffee a couple of times. But I think there's more to it than coffee. I didn't want to pry so as not to push her away. So I decided to warn you. What if this is just a misunderstanding, and you can stop her, bring her back? I want you to make peace, honestly. Zach's head was buzzing. Had Olivia? Had she really found a replacement for him? So quickly? pain and anger warred inside him. He stood up from the table, feeling like he was suffocating. "Thank you for telling me," he muttered. "I need to get some fresh air." Harper jumped up after him. "Zach, wait. I'm worried about both of you. Please don't make any sudden moves, okay? Maybe I'm wrong. Just be careful." He nodded vaguely and hurried out of the coffee shop without saying goodbye. Harper's voice was heard from behind him. "We're on the line." But Zach didn't turn around. He stopped outside, breathing in the cool autumn air. His heart was pounding. Cheating, betrayal. He wanted to scream in resentment. An inner voice tried to object. "No, I don't believe it. Harper has messed something up or is lying." But another part of his mind helpfully painted a picture. Olivia with some Jason, laughing, flirting. Zach punched a street lamp, feeling rage rising. If it was true, he had to know for sure. The thought was already pulsing in his head. Check, find proof. Whether it was love or anger, something drove him forward. He got into the car and drove home, thinking about a plan. Trust was gone, only a burning desire to find out the truth remained. When Zach returned home from his meeting with Harper, he immediately began frantically searching for confirmation of her words. He felt like a traitor invading his wife's privacy, but the thought of possible infidelity burned inside. "If this is true, I need to know for sure," he decided, sitting down at the old laptop on the kitchen table. The first thing Zach remembered was his cell phone bill. He and Olivia were on a shared family plan, and he had access to call detail records. He logged into his carrier's account and opened the last few months. His heart sank when he saw dozens of calls and messages to the same number with an unfamiliar area code in the call log for the last few weeks. The name Jason was listed next to it. Apparently, she had saved his contact under her real name. For a moment, Zach felt a twinge of pain as the name was confirmed. Jason was real. He looked at the dates and times. Many of the calls had occurred late in the evening, when she was already staying with Harper. There were also calls during the day, during her lunch break. Sometimes the calls would last for an hour. The last one happened late last night and lasted 26 minutes. Zach felt a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. He printed out the call detail records, highlighting suspicious areas with a marker, as if preparing for some kind of interrogation. But dry numbers were one thing. He wanted real evidence. Zach remembered that Olivia had an old tablet that she sometimes left at home, preferring to use her smartphone. He rummaged through the desk drawer and soon found the device, still charged. The tablet was not locked with a password. Olivia did not consider it necessary to put protection on her home gadget. Several notifications appeared on the screen, missed messages from some messenger. Zach unlocked the tablet and saw an open correspondence, apparently synced with her phone. The same Jason was listed in the contacts. Zach's hands were shaking when he clicked on the name. A long feed of messages for the past 2 weeks appeared on the screen. The English words swam before her eyes, but the gist was clear. Olivia was sharing her worries with Jason, that she was currently living with a friend, that she was confused in her marriage. Jason responded, supported her, and joked to lift her spirits. The further Zach read, the harder it became to breathe. The messages were filled with flirtation and emotional closeness that should not exist between acquaintances. "I was so tired from work today, but I was thinking about our conversation. You understand me without a word," Olivia wrote. Jason replied, "You are an amazing woman. You deserve to be happy. I thought about you all day." Such confessions were in almost every other message, and then it got even worse. Jason suggested meeting up on the weekend. "Want to go for a walk in the park or to the movies? What do you think?" Olivia replied, "Maybe we should come to your place and watch a movie at home. I don't want to be seen by my friends." Zach's vision began to blur. His home movie was a clear hint of privacy. He scrolled up, trying to find the beginning of the conversation. It seemed like they had met a little over a month ago, about a week after she moved in. The messages suggested that they had met at the gym. It turned out that Olivia had joined a fitness club, unbeknownst to Zach, and had met Jason, who was a yoga instructor. They had started talking, first exchanging a few words, then coffee after class, and off they went. Having found out this, Zach leaned back in his chair and covered his face with his hands. It turned out that Harper might not have directly set them up, but in any case, she hadn't stopped her friend from taking such a step. The most shocking message of all was the last one that came this morning, from Jason to Olivia. Can't stop thinking about last night. When will I see you? The text read, accompanied by a smile. There had apparently been no response from Olivia yet. Either it hadn't appeared on the tablet, or she had responded from her phone later. But those words, last night. Zach felt the blood rush to his face. So they had spent the night together? How? Where? Had Olivia told Harper that she was staying over at a coworker's? Or had Harper covered for her? Questions were swarming through his head, and the lines of the treacherous messages were before his eyes. He sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. His world was falling apart completely. Anger, despair, pain all mixed up. But through this storm, a strange sense of clarity was breaking through. Now everything was clear. The pause in their marriage had turned into an opportunity for her to try another life with another man. Zach felt sick. He ran outside, gulped in some fresh air, trying to calm down. What now, he thought. The end? Divorce? Or try to get her back? But after this, he didn't know if he could forgive the betrayal. Returning home, Zach carefully photographed the tablet screen with all the correspondence, every page where there were incriminating phrases. He put the screenshots in a separate folder on his laptop and made copies on a flash drive, which he hid in a safe place. He did not fully understand why this was done, he just acted mechanically. Perhaps he thought that the evidence would be useful if it came to divorce, division of property, or trial. Fragments of thoughts popped into his head that evidence was needed for a fault-based divorce. Like a machine, he collected all the evidence of treason that he could. As evening came and the adrenaline of the search wore off, emptiness set in. Zach sat on the porch of his house, looking at the darkening sky. He held the call detail sheet in his hands, a meaningless sheet of numbers that nonetheless destroyed the last of his hopes. He realized there was nothing more to wait for. Olivia had made her choice, even if she hadn't yet announced it publicly. Hard conversations and decisions loomed ahead. The wind rustled the withered grass on the lawn. The evening was still and cold. Zach shuddered and went inside, closing the door behind him. A hardness was slowly forming in his chest, like a clenched fist. If their story was going to end, he intended to come out of it with dignity, protecting what was dear to him. The very next day after discovering the betrayal, Zach made a firm decision. It was time to consult a lawyer. Taking a day off from work, he arranged a meeting with the recommended family lawyer, Mrs. Andrews, whose office was located in the city center. Sitting on the leather sofa in the reception area, Zach nervously fiddled with a folder of documents. There were his call printouts and a flash drive with copies of the correspondence evidence that he was prepared to present if necessary. Mrs. Andrews was a short, energetic woman of about 50, with a piercing gaze. They shook hands, and she invited him to sit down at the table. "How can I help you?" she began in an official tone, opening her notebook. Zach swallowed. "I want to consult about divorce. I might file the papers soon. The situation is," he briefly outlined the gist. "They got married 4 years ago, have no children together. Their property is essentially a house he bought before marriage, and a recent separate life, which led to his wife having an affair on the side." The lawyer listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Having heard about the house, she asked the date of purchase and in whose name it was registered. Having learned that the house was purchased by Zach 2 years before the marriage and registered only in his name, Mrs. Andrews smiled slightly. "In that case, you don't have to worry. In Ohio, the mere fact of entering into marriage does not give a spouse rights to property acquired by the other spouse before the wedding. The house will remain yours as premarital property and will not be subject to division." Zach nodded, relieved even though he had expected it. "What about the rest of the property?" the lawyer asked. "Joint accounts, cars, major purchases during the marriage?" Zach shrugged. "We didn't have any common savings. Maybe just furniture, household appliances. We each had our own cars, also bought before marriage. No loans, no children. In general, there's nothing to divide except, perhaps, personal belongings. Mrs. Andrews made a note. I see. This will simplify the process. As for the procedure itself, you can file for divorce on the grounds of adultery. This is recognized by law as a basis. However, I must warn you, the so-called fault divorce entails a longer and more difficult process. You will have to prove the fact of treason present convincing evidence to the court, possibly witness testimony. Zach nodded and put his folder on the table. I have evidence. Call details, correspondence. Here, take a look. He handed the lawyer several printed pages. She glanced at them and pursed her lips. Yes, very clear, especially the messages. This certainly indicates adultery. She returned the papers. In that case, you have enough grounds. But think about whether you want to go down this path. The thing is that you can file for divorce without indicating guilt, the so-called no fault. In Ohio, divorce by mutual consent without sorting out the relationship is usually quicker and easier. If you declare adultery, the process will be more conflictual and lengthy. You will have to officially bring charges against your wife, air your dirty laundry in public, so to speak. Zach clenched his jaw. She betrayed me. I don't want to keep this quiet. The lawyer nodded understandingly. I understand your feelings, but my job is to lay out all the options. Keep in mind that financially it will hardly make a difference to you whether you state her guilt or not. The court, when dividing property and deciding on benefits, is guided by justice, not revenge. You won't have to, for example, divide the house we've already found out. Alimony for your spouse is unlikely in your case. The marriage is relatively short-lived. Both are able-bodied. In addition, if it comes to discussing alimony, the court may take into account infidelity as a factor and will most likely refuse to provide your wife with any support. Alimony? Zach asked, not having thought about that aspect before. So she could make a claim? The lawyer shrugged. Theoretically, if there is a large gap in the income of one spouse or the other is in a difficult financial situation, temporary maintenance is possible. But your income and that of your wife are roughly comparable, as far as I understand. She is a teacher, you are a mechanic, both earn a stable income. I think that even without discussing the infidelity, the judge would not have ordered spousal support. And if you present these messages, even more so. In Ohio, judges can take into account marital infidelity when deciding on financial support, although they are not obliged to, but in any case, the chances are almost zero. Zach exhaled slowly. He was beginning to realize that, in practical terms, the divorce probably wouldn't take away his house or his money, just his nerves. But emotionally, he wanted to establish the truth. He looked his lawyer in the eye. I want to file for divorce because it's her fault, as a matter of principle. Okay, Mrs. Andrews nodded. That's your right. We'll prepare a statement of claim, citing adultery as the basis for the charge. You'll have to sign a sworn statement that the adultery took place and attach the evidence you've collected. I'm ready, Zach answered briefly. The lawyer made a few more notes. After the summons is filed and served, her side may get in touch. Sometimes, when confronted with evidence, defendants prefer not to let it get to a scandal and agree to the terms. Perhaps a settlement agreement will be reached, and the case will be concluded relatively quickly. But be prepared for a protracted scenario. If she decides to deny or drag it out, although, with such evidence, this is unlikely. I see, Zach said. How soon will it all start? I'll have the papers ready in a couple of days, Mrs. Andrews replied. Then we'll file the case straight away and notify your wife. It usually takes a few days to serve, depending on how you find her. Then there's a preliminary hearing in a few weeks. In general, a divorce can take anywhere from a few months to 6 months or longer, depending on how the other party reacts. If we're lucky and she doesn't argue, it could be done by the end of the year. Zach nodded, taking in the information. It all sounded hard, but inevitable. At the end of the meeting, the lawyer clarified a couple of personal details, took contacts, and assured, "We will take care of your protection. And remember, your situation is not unique. Thousands of people go through this. You will cope. The main thing is to stay calm and act within the legal framework. Zach thanked Mrs. Andrews and left her office. He felt heavy in his heart, but at the same time he felt like he had control over something. The process had begun. Now all he had to do was wait for Olivia to receive the papers and for the reality of their family breakup to become inevitable. Olivia returned home, or rather, to Harper's apartment after a day at work in a depressed mood. At school, everything was going wrong. Thoughts constantly returned to Zach. She missed him, but pride and confusion did not allow her to take the first step. At home, Harper was waiting for her, sprawled on the couch with a magazine. "Hello, how are you today?" asked my friend. "It's fine," Olivia said tiredly, putting her bag down. "It's a headache with these reports." Before she could finish speaking, the doorbell rang. Olivia looked questioningly at Harper. "Are you waiting for someone?" "No," she shrugged. Olivia walked up to the door and opened it slightly. An unfamiliar man of about 30 in a courier uniform stood on the threshold. "Olivia Turner," he asked. "Ah, yes, it's me." The man handed her a thick envelope. "You have a court summons. Good afternoon." Olivia was taken aback and automatically took the envelope. The courier nodded and left, leaving her standing in the doorway with wide eyes. "What is it?" Harper's voice came from the room. Olivia closed the door, barely hearing. Her heart was pounding in her throat. She tore open the envelope and pulled out the papers with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the official lines. Notice to defendant. Complaint for dissolution of marriage. Plaintiff, Zachary Turner. Ground, adultery. The letters began to blur. Olivia felt her legs giving way. She sank to the floor in the hallway, staring at the papers. Harper jumped up and rushed towards her. "Liv, what's there?" Olivia slowly raised her eyes to her, full of tears and horror. "He filed for divorce because of," she swallowed, "infidelity." Harper covered her mouth with her hand, feigning surprise. "Damn, he couldn't. Why all of a sudden?" He didn't know. Olivia threw the papers on the floor, sobbing. "I knew, Harper. Somehow I found out. It's all written here. He's accusing me of adultery. Can you imagine?" But Harper tried to find the words. "He didn't say a name, did he? Maybe he just wanted to push the issue." Olivia frantically flipped through the lawsuit. The name, her lips trembled more violently. "No, it says, with an unidentified person named Jason. He knows the name, God." Harper sat down next to her, trying to put her arm around her shoulders. "Quiet, quiet. Let's calm down. We need to figure out how he found out." Olivia pulled back, looking into her friend's face. "And you? Didn't tell him? Maybe you hinted." "Are you crazy?" Harper was indignant. "Why would I? I didn't really know about your Jason. He probably found something. Maybe he was following you or looked at your phone." Olivia blinked in shock. A phone or a tablet. She suddenly remembered that she had left the old tablet at Zach's. All the messages had probably synced. Her messages to Jason popped into her head. A chill of horror gripped her heart. "Oh God," she whispered. "He read everything." Harper squeezed her temples. "Damn. Liv, even if that's the case, we need to think about what to do now. He officially filed for divorce. This is serious." Olivia burst into tears, hiding her face in her hands. "I didn't want it to come to this. I thought we would just live separately and sort it out." Harper gently stroked her back. I know. But you said to yourself that you are unhappy with him. Maybe it's for the best. It hurts now, but then you'll be free and start a new life." Olivia raised her head sharply, her eyes flashing. "For the better. I'll lose my husband, Harper, and if the school finds out, I'm having a messy divorce." She trailed off, but the thought was terrifying. Small town, teachers in plain sight. Rumors would spread. Harper winced. "Well, it's not the 19th century. No one will burn you at the stake. Divorce is a matter of life." "But not for that reason," Olivia moaned. Harper took her by the shoulders and looked into her eyes. "Look, You can always deny everything. If he doesn't have direct evidence, it's his word against yours. Olivia shook her head. He found something, otherwise he wouldn't have written about the name. And, I can't lie, in court, under oath, no. She tried to wipe away the tears. Part of her still couldn't believe this was happening. Yesterday she was texting Jason, and today she was dealing with legal papers that were destroying her life. What should I do? She asked in a weak voice. Harper stood up and began to pace nervously around the room. First of all, don't panic. You need to consult with a lawyer about how to respond. Perhaps you can persuade Zach to change the reason to incompatibility of characters or something like that so as not to throw mud. Or better yet, persuade him to formalize it peacefully without going to court through an agreement. After all, you have nothing to divide except the house, but the house is his. Olivia's friend's words echoed in her head. The house is his. The house she considered hers was now in danger of being lost. She suddenly realized that if the divorce went through, she would have to leave forever with virtually nothing. The thought brought a fresh wave of tears. Harper noticed and threw up her hands. Damn it, Olivia, don't cry again. I understand it hurts. But think about it. You wanted a break yourself. Why are you crying now that it's all over? Maybe it really is better this way without prolonged torment. Olivia jumped up. I didn't want to get divorced. I wanted to understand myself. It was you who sang to me about a pause, but it turned out, she sobbed, it turned out that I ruined everything. Harper paused for a moment, then replied coldly, Don't put it on me. I suggested a way out, and it was you who decided. And if it comes down to it, cheating on your husband is also your decision, not mine. These words hit the sore spot. Olivia turned pale. Why are you like this? Harper closed her eyes tiredly. Sorry, I'm nervous too. Let's just think about what to do. We need to contact a lawyer, prepare a response to the lawsuit. Maybe we can persuade Zach to change his mind. You know him, maybe he lost his temper, and then... He didn't lose his temper, Olivia said resignedly. If he went to see a lawyer and officially filed, that's it. He's burned out. There was silence. Olivia stared into space, crumpling the summons in her hands. The tears dried, leaving only emptiness and horror of the unknown. How can this be? She whispered. Is this really the end? Without talking, without trying. Well, we can still talk, Harper quietly interjected. He should at least tell you something in person. Maybe he'll call or want to meet. And as if in response to her words, Olivia's phone vibrated on the table. The name Zach appeared on the screen. Both women froze. Take it, Harper whispered. Olivia brought the phone to her ear with a trembling hand. Hello. Zach's voice was even if tense. It's me. Did you get the papers? Yes. She closed her eyes, hearing her familiar voice. Zach, He interrupted. I suggest we meet and discuss how we will proceed. Does that make sense? Olivia nodded frantically, even though he couldn't see. Yes, of course. Please, let's talk. Okay? Tonight, the Ridgeview Bar on 8th Street, Is 7 o'clock convenient for you? Olivia was surprised by the choice of location, but quickly agreed. Yes, I will come. Okay? See you later. He hung up without another word. Olivia held the phone to her ear for a second, then lowered it. Harper studied her face with a careful gaze. Well, he wants to meet today, to talk, Olivia answered, still trying to process. At the Ridgeview Bar at 7. Harper raised her eyebrows. A bar, it's a bit strange. But the main thing is, there's a chance to discuss something. Maybe he's really ready to change the terms. Olivia nodded weakly. A tiny spark of hope glimmered in her soul. What if all was not lost? She glanced at her friend. Will you come with me? Harper smiled at the corner of her lips. Do you want me to be there? If necessary, of course, I will go for support. Olivia breathed a sigh of relief. She really didn't want to go to this difficult conversation alone. She had no idea that Zach had invited her not to seek a compromise. Zach arrived at the Ridgeview bar a little early. He chose a table in the corner with a good view of the entrance and ordered a beer. Conflicting thoughts swirled in his head. He was determined to set the record straight for both his wife and Harper. After all the manipulation and lies, he wanted to expose both of them. There was a pain in his soul. He had once loved Olivia with all his heart, and now he was preparing for what might be his last conversation, and in this format. Harper had sent him a text message not long before. "I'll be at Ridgeview tonight at 7. Come by if you want to chill out." Apparently, she didn't know that Olivia would be there that evening. Zach didn't respond to the invitation, but decided to seize the moment. It was important to him that all three of them were in the same place. Let the truth come out. At 7:05 p.m., the bar door swung open and Olivia and Harper walked in together. Zach felt his heart skip a beat. He stood up, drawing their attention. Olivia noticed him immediately and smiled shyly, but Harper's face froze in surprise. The girls walked toward him. Zach motioned for them to sit at a table. "Hi," Olivia said quietly, sitting down on the chair opposite. "Thank you for inviting me." "Hi," Zach replied shortly. He looked at Harper. "Good to see you too." Harper narrowed her eyes as she sat down next to Olivia. "I didn't think our evening would be a three-way affair, but hi, Zach." There was an awkward pause. Olivia fiddled with the strap of her purse, unsure where to begin. Zach took a silent sip of beer, looking expectantly at his wife. Harper looked around uneasily, clearly feeling out of place. Finally, Olivia made up her mind. "Zach, I wanted to say, about these papers." She waved her hand weakly. "I'm really sorry that everything turned out this way." Zach chuckled. "It just happened that way. A coincidence, then." Olivia blushed. "No, I'm not making excuses. I'm guilty, I know. It's just, I didn't think that you would immediately." "You'll file for divorce," Zach finished harshly for her. "Why should I wait? You made it clear that you needed someone else." Olivia hung her head. Harper intervened, trying to speak calmly. "Zach, maybe we shouldn't talk about this now. You're both emotional. You could have parted peacefully without any dirt. Why this show with accusations?" Zach turned his cold gaze to her. "Peacefully, after your pause ruined my marriage." He chuckled. "You wanted her to sort herself out." "Well, did your wisdom help her?" Harper frowned. "Don't blame me. You yourself are to blame for your decisions." Olivia nervously placed her hand on her friend's elbow. "Harp, please." But Zach couldn't hold back any longer. "Of course, it has nothing to do with it. It's just a friend who whispered to my wife that she was downtrodden and had a boring life. A friend who has no happiness of her own, so she wanted to break someone else's." "Zach," Olivia shrieked, looking at him with a mixture of anger and pleading. "Stop it." Harper turned pale, her eyes flashing. "How dare you? All I've done since the beginning is support Olivia. If it weren't for me, she would have lost herself completely next to you. When was the last time you made her happy, huh? Turned the girl into a housewife." "Enough." Olivia winced at her own scream. "Both of you." But they seemed to break through. Zach threw a folder across the table to her, the same one he had shown to the lawyer. Sheets with copies of messages and calls scattered across the table. "Look, Olivia, see? This is all your searching for yourself. With the yoga boy, right? You found yourself in his bed?" Olivia stared at the printouts. Familiar lines of messages, dates of calls. Her chest split in half from shame and rage. She raised her head. "Were you following me?" "I had to," Zach snapped. "And I learned a lot of interesting things. Don't worry, my lawyer is already handling all of this, so you won't be able to get out of it." "Oh my God," was all she could manage to exhale, tears streaming from her eyes. "How could you rummage through my personal? How could you betray me?" Zach shouted, feeling like he was on the verge of tears, but his anger was overshadowing him. "What did you want to achieve with this? You wanted freedom, here you go." "Oh, for fuck's sake, both of you, cool it." Harper's voice rang out sharply. The bar patrons were already turning around, watching the drama. Harper jumped up. Maybe we should move this debriefing to a personal space. Zach stood up too, clenching his fists on the table. What, is it unpleasant in front of people? And I was pleased to find out that my wife was having an affair. And you, Harper, he literally burned her with his gaze. You knew from the very beginning, right? Supported her in it. No, Harper flared up. I didn't do anything. She paused, remembering that she had warned Zach about Jason. Understanding flashed in the man's eyes. Oh, is that so? So, first you turned her against me, and then you ran away and told me everything. You're a great friend. I can't say anything. Olivia looked from her husband to her friend in shock. Wait, what is he talking about? Told everything. What does that mean? Harper glanced at her quickly. Don't listen. He's talking nonsense. But Olivia did not retreat. A sticky fear gripped her. Harper, were you talking to Zach behind my back? I wanted to help, Harper cried, losing her composure. I thought maybe he'd come to his senses if he knew. You? Olivia stood up slowly, her eyes widening. You told him? Is this all because of you? Her voice broke. Not exactly, I just hinted, Harper muttered. Zach chuckled. Well, that's it. Great friendship. Shut up, Harper snapped, suddenly snatching Zach's glass of beer from the table and splashing it with its contents. The foamy liquid splashed onto the man's shirt. Hey, indignant cries were heard around. Zach pulled back, wiping his face. Olivia looked at Harper in shock. What are you doing? He deserved it, she cried, breathing heavily. He's sitting here, the damn moralist. Harper, that's enough, Olivia screamed. That's enough. Her nerves couldn't take it anymore. It seemed that in another moment something irreparable would happen. A second later, the loud screams turned into something more frightening. Olivia spurred Harper into action, pushing her shoulder. How could you? Harper, not to be outdone, shoved her back. It's all your own fault. Traitor, Olivia screamed, and, forgetting herself, rushed at her best friend. She grabbed Harper, trying to take out all the pain. Harper screamed, and in response dug her nails into her arm. Oh, you, was all that escaped her lips. A violent scuffle ensued. Two women grappled, knocking over chairs. The bar patrons gasped. Someone shouted, Hey, hey, take it easy. Zach rushed to break it up, but was hit in the cheek with an elbow either from Olivia or Harper. It was hard to tell. That hurts, he cried, retreating and holding his face. The crowd stepped back around the fighters, making room. Someone was already filming what was happening on a phone, and excited cries could be heard in the air. Wow, two women are fighting. Olivia, blinded by tears and rage, at one point slapped Harper across the cheek. Harper yelped and responded with a hard slap of her palm, causing Olivia's teeth to rattle. Enraged, they continued to lunge at each other. Harper managed to tug Olivia's hair. Olivia responded by scratching Harper's arm. Which? Harper screamed. I wanted to do good for you, and you. You ruined my life, Olivia screamed back. Outsiders intervened. Two male bartenders from the staff rushed to separate them. With difficulty, having received a couple of random jabs, they managed to pull the opponents away from each other. Both were breathing heavily, strands of hair were disheveled, there were red marks of blows and scratches on their faces. Olivia was crying bitterly. Harper was angrily trying to break free from the bartender's grip in order to pounce again. That's it, ladies, that's enough. One of the bartenders said loudly, The police are coming now. He's on his way, someone shouted from the entrance. There was a visitor with a phone, apparently the one who had called the cops. Olivia seemed to sober up when she heard the word police. She stopped struggling against the guy who was holding her and looked around at the people around her in confusion. People were staring at her, some were whispering. It dawned on her that she had just gotten into a fight in a public place, like some kind of hooligan girl. Harper, on the other hand, continued to seethe, although her ardor was noticeably fading when she realized that she was being filmed on cameras from almost every direction. A few minutes later, two policemen entered the hall. Okay, disperse, commanded one, a tall sergeant with a mustache. Who's causing trouble here? the crowd parted, revealing Harper and Olivia. The bartenders, still holding the women, began to explain that there had been a fight, that the two had attacked each other. The police looked at each other. "Citizens, you'll have to come with us," said the second officer, already putting handcuffs on Olivia. She sobbed in humiliation, but did not resist. Harper also received bracelets on her wrists. "Zach, tell them," Olivia tried to say, looking back at her husband. But Zach was silent, watching in shock as the two women he had once loved the most were led out in handcuffs. He knew this was the end. There was nowhere else to go. Even if he wanted to forgive, there was no turning back. They had literally fought, and now the law would intervene. On the way to the patrol car, Harper called out, "I hate you." It was unclear to whom these words were addressed, Olivia or Zach, perhaps both. Olivia just sobbed, hanging her head. A crowd of onlookers poured out onto the bar's porch to watch the detainees being loaded into a car. Someone clapped mockingly. "Bravo, ladies," someone shouted after them. Someone was discussing, "She's a teacher, can you imagine?" Zach stood in the doorway, clenching his fists. He felt ashamed and hurt for Olivia, although he felt that he himself could no longer fix anything. "Hey, buddy, are these your ladies?" One of the officers addressed him, coming closer. "You'd better go to the station and write an explanation. You're a participant in the incident." Zach nodded resignedly. "Yes, sure." The policeman wrote down his details from his words and told him to get into another car if he was driving his own. "Follow us," he said. 20 minutes later, everyone was at the police station. Olivia and Harper were fingerprinted, and their belongings were taken according to the protocol. They were told that they were being detained for petty hooliganism and disturbing the peace. They explained the rights and hinted that, most likely, it would all end with a fine of up to $150 if both admit guilt, but they will be left in a holding cell overnight to cool off. When the heat of the battle had passed, both women were in a depressed state. They were put in the same cell, which seemed like a cruel curiosity. All night they sat in different corners of the cell, not saying a word. Olivia quietly cried into her sleeve. Harper remained sullenly silent, only occasionally casting angry glances at her former friend. In the morning, having paid their bail and received a summons to court for their misdemeanor, they both left the station through different doors. Each knew that their friendship was over, and their entire lives as they knew them had been destroyed overnight. There were consequences ahead of them that were far more serious than the bruises and scrapes from a fight. It was another weekday in the city's county court. In courtroom 5, the Turner divorce case was being heard. 3 months had passed since the memorable bar fight. During that time, Olivia and Zach had never spoken directly. All contact was through lawyers. Harper stopped communicating with Olivia after that evening. They moved away, and the friends never saw each other again. On the right bench sat Zach with his lawyer, Mrs. Andrews. On the left were Olivia and her representative, a heavy-set man in a suit. Both ex-spouses avoided looking at each other. Zach, thinner and more stern, stared straight ahead, trying not to think about what the woman sitting opposite him had become to him. Olivia looked pale and haggard. She had lost a lot of weight recently. The case was almost at its finale. Olivia, after some initial resistance, had finally agreed to a fault-based divorce. Her lawyer had tried to remove the reference to adultery from the wording during preliminary negotiations, but Mrs. Andrews insisted that there was sufficient evidence and did not back down. To avoid further escalation, Olivia withdrew her objections. Now the judge had to formalize the terms of the divorce. Considering the evidence presented of the defendant's adultery, the judge monotonously declared, leafing through the papers, the marriage is subject to dissolution due to the defendant's fault. The parties agreed that there is no jointly acquired property subject to division. The residential building located at the address. The judge named the address was acquired by the plaintiff before the marriage and is his personal property. In accordance with Ohio law, the defendant does not claim this property. The judge glanced at Olivia, who lowered her eyes and nodded slightly. Her lawyer also chuckled in confirmation. Zach involuntarily breathed a sigh of relief. The house issue was resolved, as expected. As for the cars, the judge continued, each spouse will retain their own vehicles purchased before the marriage as their own property. The bank accounts, he checked the paperwork, will be divided as follows. The balance of the joint savings account, $2,300, will be transferred in full to the plaintiff to cover legal costs. The defendant has consented to this, correct? Yes, Your Honor, her lawyer confirmed. Excellent. There are no credit obligations. The court is also considering the issue of assigning spousal support. Here, the judge adjusted his glasses. The defendant's side filed a motion to award her temporary financial assistance, citing the loss of her job and the deterioration of her financial situation. However, given the short duration of the marriage, the comparability of the parties' labor potential, and the presence of proven guilt in the defendant's actions, the court considers the requirement for spousal support to be unfounded. The defendant is denied the assignment of alimony. Olivia closed her eyes, another blow, albeit expected. After the fight, the video of their disgrace spread across the internet, and the school administration offered her to leave her job at her own request. This story was already widely discussed, and the details would soon end up in the court of public opinion. She was now really sitting without a job and means of support, but after such a scandalous departure, she could not count on maintenance from her ex-husband. Her lawyer tried to press the fact that she was left without an income, but the opposing side easily countered. The reason for losing her job was her own behavior, which was caught on video. The judge agreed, and the issue was dropped. Thus, the judge concluded, the financial claims are settled. There are no questions about custody of the children, since the parties have no children. The court orders the marriage between Zachary Turner and Olivia Turner to be dissolved. The case is closed. He banged the hammer, and something in Olivia's soul broke completely. It was all over. As Olivia left the courtroom, she paused for a moment, watching Zach walk away. She wanted to run up to him and shout, "I'm sorry," but her throat was tight. He didn't even look back. Her lawyer muttered next to her, "That's it, you're free now, or rather, Miss Miller." Free. She smiled bitterly. She didn't want that kind of freedom. Zach stepped out onto the courthouse steps and took a breath of fresh autumn air. The divorce was finalized. The formalities were over. He felt no joy, but rather devastation and fatigue. He had lost everything he could on the way to this day: love, trust, and even faith in people. But he had saved his home, his honor, and his peace. Dylan was waiting for him at the steps, his hand outstretched for a handshake. "Well, brother, congratulations on officially becoming a bachelor, I guess." Zach shook his friend's hand and smiled weakly. "Thanks, buddy. Let's go have a drink. To the end of this epic." They slowly moved away from the courthouse. They met people on their way. Some of them looked at Zach with interest after all. The loud story about the fight between two women had already flown around the city and the news. But he didn't care. He knew that there was still a period ahead when the whispers behind his back would haunt him, but he believed that everything would soon settle down. Now that the trial had put an end to it, he could finally start living on his own new life. A few days after the ill-fated brawl, a video of the incident went viral. One of the bar patrons posted the video under the headline, "Teacher fights with friend over husband," and by the next morning it had been shared by thousands of users. The local news picked up the story of two women, a primary school teacher and her friend, getting into a fight in a pub became a sensation. In the TV station's report, a soft-spoken announcer announced, "Primary school teacher resigns after allegations of inappropriate behavior outside of work," showing the facade of the school and an excerpt from the management statement about Mrs. Turner's resignation. Officially, it was said that she left of her own free will, but it was clear to everyone that she was forced to leave so as not to tarnish the school's reputation. Olivia watched the news with a mixture of shame and horror. A month ago, she had been standing at the blackboard in front of the class, and now the entire neighborhood was discussing her disgrace. The screen showed blurry footage from the bar, herself, disheveled, shouting something with a twisted face, Harper waving her arms nearby. Zach's figure flickered between them. The comments of the announcer and the invited psychologist sounded like a death sentence: stress, internal problems. But it didn't change the essence. Everyone saw a disrespected, explosive woman who had failed to control herself in public. After the report, Olivia's phone began to ring off the hook with messages. School colleagues wrote embarrassed words of support or asked for details. The principal dryly asked her to submit her resignation letter. The parents of several students sent angry letters. "Aren't you ashamed? You taught our children morals." One father demanded that she officially lose her teaching license. Heartbroken, Olivia turned off her phone, unable to bear the curses and ridicule on social media any longer. She lost everything: her family, her job, her friends, her good name. The only person who did not turn away was her mother, who lived in another state. Mrs. Miller called every day, crying into the phone and supporting her daughter as best she could. In the end, having gathered the last of her will, Olivia decided to go to her mother for a while to wait out the scandal. She sold her car for next to nothing to buy a ticket and have some money for the first time. The city where she had spent so many happy years became a prison of shame for her, and she did not have the strength to stay. The viral video also cost Harper dearly. Although she was not named in the news, she was referred to simply as a friend. Many knew her by sight. She got into trouble with her ex-husband. He called her as soon as he recognized her and shouted in rage that he was wasting his child support if she was spending it on drinking and fighting. He threatened to go to court to review the terms of the payments. Harper was scared. Her comfortable existence was hanging by a thread. If the child support was cut or canceled, she would have to urgently find a job, and she had long since dropped out of the profession. Harper was a librarian by education, but she had not worked since her marriage. Friends with whom she had previously socialized in high society, her ex-husband was a wealthy man, now avoided her. Everyone had seen that disgraceful video, and although the media did not name names, the right people knew. A couple of friends' acquaintances directly stated that they did not want to maintain contact with such a troublemaker. Harper reaped the fruits of her own influence. She was left almost alone. One day, she walked into a supermarket and noticed two cashiers whispering and looking at her sideways. At the fruit counter, a young man recognized her and hissed, fighting like a market woman. Harper, burning with humiliation, ran out without buying anything. Returning to her empty apartment, she really burst into tears for the first time. After all, everything she had fought for freedom, a new life had turned into a complete collapse. And the worst thing was the realization that she herself had ruined her friendship with Olivia, dragging her onto this slippery slope. Soon, a court hearing was held on their administrative case of hooliganism. Olivia and Harper appeared in the courtroom, trying not to look at each other. The judge reviewed the materials. By that time, they had already managed to become celebrities, and the judge did not hide his irritation about this. The women admitted guilt, showed remorse. They were sentenced to a fine of $200 each, taking into account court costs and 40 hours of community service. In the sentence, the judge especially noted the outrageousness of the fight that took place in a public place and admonished both. At the end of the trial, without saying a word, Olivia and Harper went their separate ways, as if strangers. In fact, they had become so. A week later, Olivia left the city. At the station, only her mother and a couple of colleagues who decided to support her were there to see her off. She left, not knowing if she would ever return. More than anything, she wanted to forget what she had experienced like a bad dream. As soon as the train started moving, she felt a tiny burden fall from her soul, away from the places where she had experienced such humiliation. Ahead was a long period of work on herself, recovery, atonement for mistakes. But one thought haunted her the entire way. If it were possible to turn back time, she would never have listened to other people's advice then, in the quiet harbor of her marriage. Harper, having waited out the noise and the gossip, also decided to change the environment. To be on the safe side, she moved to a neighboring state, closer to her aunt. Her fears were confirmed. Her ex-husband reduced her alimony through the court, stating that her financial situation had improved, a hint that she was able to work, since she was fighting in bars. Although the judge was skeptical about the argumentation, he partially satisfied the request, reducing the payments. Now Harper had to look for a job. She got a job as an assistant librarian at a college. The pay there was modest, and her life was no longer the carefree, beautiful fairy tale it had been before. Sometimes, scrolling through social networks, she came across memes and jokes made on the basis of that viral video, and in frustration she turned off her phone. Anger gradually gave way to bitterness. On New Year's Eve, drinking wine alone, Harper wrote a long letter to Olivia, full of apologies and regrets. But she never sent it. Too much had happened, and it was unlikely that her former friend, would ever want to communicate again. So both heroines of that sensational story lost everything they had. Only lessons for the future remained, and scars visible and invisible, reminding them of the value of what they did not save. 6 months had passed since the official divorce. Life was gradually returning to normal for Zach Turner. He was still working as a mechanic at the plant, occasionally picking up extra shifts, partly to keep his mind busy, partly to save up for a long-time dream, restoring his old pickup. The same 1975 that had been sitting under a tarp for many years. Now that he had evenings and weekends to himself, Zach decided to finally make his plan come true. He spent every evening in the garage, immersing himself in the world of wrenches, pistons, and grinders. The full restoration was going to be thorough. It was necessary to overhaul the engine, update the suspension, replace the rusted cabin floors, restore the body panels, freshen up the interior, in a word, go over the entire iron friend. Zach broke the job down into stages and moved forward methodically. First, he removed the engine and old V8 covered in a thick layer of oil and dust. He took it apart down to the last screw, cleaned it, and replaced worn parts. Fortunately, some of them could be found online or at auto dismantlers. A new piston group, gaskets, honed cylinders, the heart of the pickup, had to beat like new. Then he took on the frame and suspension, replaced rusted mounts, updated the springs and shock absorbers, and overhauled the brakes. Little by little, the old Ford came back to life. The body was especially troublesome. Under the tarpaulin, the years had taken their toll. Rust had spread like red sores on the fender arches, and the doors had eaten holes at the bottom. Zach ordered repair kits, steel inserts for the arches and door panels. Using a grinder, he cut out the rotten areas and, using the welding skills he had once acquired in the army, welded on new metal plates. He cleaned the seams, applied putty, leveled it, and voila, the body was solid again, without through holes. He decided to repaint the car himself. He spent a long time choosing the color and settled on a deep dark blue, close to the original shade of the 70s. Having chosen a warm, windless day, he armed himself with a spray gun. Several layers of primer, then paint, then clear varnish, and the cabin and roof sparkled with newness. Of course, there were some mistakes here and there from an amateur painter, but Zach was happy. He did it with his own hands. The interior of the pickup also needed some attention. The seat upholstery was cracked and torn at the seams. The floor was covered with linoleum worn to holes. Zach found an old seat from another truck that fit in the dump and upholstered it himself with leatherette in a pleasant coffee color. He covered the floor of the cabin with new carpet, under which he first laid soundproofing. The ceiling was covered with light gray fabric. He updated the dashboard, replaced the cracked plastic shield, cleaned the copper contacts. When he put everything back in place, the interior looked almost like in the youth of this car. Working on the truck became more than just a hobby for Zach, it was therapy. Each bolt tightened into place seemed to restore order to his own life. Dylan often dropped by to help, either lift the engine with a hoist or keep the company with beer during evening gatherings near the hood. The friends often joked. Once, watching Zach enthusiastically adjust the valves, Dylan laughed. Yes, this Ford survived your family life better. It turned out to be stronger, my friend. Zach only smiled sadly then, but over time he realized that his friend was right in his own way. A car can be taken apart and reassembled, replacing the broken parts. But a relationship, if it cracks, you can't glue it back together. Finally, the day came when the truck was ready for its first trip. Zach filled it with fresh oil, checked all the components one last time. He turned the ignition key, the engine sneezed and grabbed after a couple of turns and began to purr smoothly. Zach couldn't help but smile. It worked. He carefully rolled the truck out of the garage into the morning light. The dark blue body was shining, the engine was purring like a contented cat. The neighbor, Mr. Holden, looked out, raising his eyebrows in surprise. After all, this junk had been standing motionless for 10 years, and now it looked like new. Zach waved to his neighbor and, getting behind the wheel, carefully moved off. The pickup truck rolled smoothly and softly down the street. Every turn of the steering wheel gave off a pleasant weight from the restored power steering. The brakes were responsive. Zach pulled out onto a country road outside the city and stepped on the gas. The wind rustled in the slightly open window. The engine rumbled cheerfully at high revs. A smile appeared on Zach's face by itself, perhaps the first such sincere one in a long time. At that moment, he felt truly free and calm. Months of pain and anger, lawsuits and scandals were behind him. Ahead was a quiet morning, a new road, and the smooth hum of a serviceable engine. And although the mental scars still made themselves felt, Zach believed everything can be fixed. With time. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.